"Step out now," that's what he said, hand resting on his holster like it was a thought he could lean on. And I opened the door. Slow shoulders, square dress, blues, catching the sun. And for a heartbeat, the street got quiet in that weird way. A room goes quiet before someone tells the truth. Because the second I stood up with those silver eagles on my shoulders, you could see Officer Brent Doyle's confidence crack like a windshield hit by a pebble that turns out to be a bullet. And right then, I knew his story about me was about to meet the real one. 2 hours earlier, it was just a Tuesday in Westbrook Heights, sprinklers, ticking dogs, nosing fences, Ridgeview Park, doing that perfect neighborhood thing you see in brochures. And I had finished my 0600 workout, checked my encrypted emails, hung my uniform carefully in a garment bag on the backseat hook, because inspection at 1400 was on the calendar, and that uniform never touches the trunk, never sits folded. You treat the fabric that carried you through deployments like a living thing. My aunt drilled that into me when I was a lieutenant, and the habit stuck. I had a quick stop at City Hall planned to talk about training funds and transparency dashboards, the nitty-gritty stuff that keeps citizens and good officers safer, and yeah, I oversee a big chunk of those dollars in our region, so I know exactly how many of them flow to Westbrook PD. The coupe I drove is ceramic gray that goes blue in the morning, not a celebrity car, not a showboat, just something I bought myself when I pinned on Colonel, the kind of gift you buy when your spreadsheet and your conscience both say yes. And sure, folks make assumptions, they always do. Sometimes they assume a man paid for it. Sometimes they assume the car explains the driver, and sometimes they decide the driver explains a crime. You know what I mean. I clocked him 6 blocks back in the mirror, not tailgating, not drifting, just hanging there in that zone between curiosity and intent. And I settled into the routine that kept me and my convoys alive overseas. Hands at 10 and 2 speed on the nose, full stops. Turn signals early enough to be polite. Windows cracked paperwork within reach, but not in hand. Breathing even mind taking mental snapshots, the kind you can retrieve under oath without breaking a sweat. At Maple and Ash, his lights flashed and 3 other units slid in like they practiced the move in a parking lot, and maybe they had the tires made that soft, scruffing sound when rubber kisses paint. And I felt that familiar tightening under the ribs. Not fear, exactly, not anger, exactly. More like my body reminding my brain that somebody else already wrote a script and would prefer I just stick to my lines. He walked up with the prose of a man who thinks punctuation is for other people. All command and no question. "Do you know why I stopped you?" And I said, "No, sir. Please inform me." Calm and clear. Because my voice goes lower when the temperature rises, a little trick I learned from years of briefings where the loudest person in the room wasn't the one with rank. He skimmed my military ID the way some folks skim instruction manuals, like the words are optional and the results are guaranteed. He asked who owns the car. I said I do. He asked how I afford it. And let me tell you, that question is not about math. It's about a story he wrote in his head and wants me to recite. And I could have listed my deployments, the bonuses, the vehicles I sold, the late nights and early mornings, but I wasn't auditioning for a morality play. So I said the only sentence that belonged on the record, "Lawful income, sir." He announced a search as if consent was an afterthought and probable cause was a rumor he could promote into law, and I ran the calculus. Every black person who has lived long enough learns to do in a half-second resist and risk escalation in a parking lot that won't remember your name or comply under protest, and build a case that will outlast a news cycle. So I said it clearly and steadily for the mic on his chest and the file on the server. I'll comply under protest, because words matter when the room changes and people start pretending they didn't hear you. He popped my trunk like he was digging up treasure, and what he found was fabric pressed flat and sharp in a garment bag, a case with ribbons and medals arranged in the order. The Army taught me a little velvet pouch with challenge coins from units I trained and commanded. And to me, those coins are faces and fields and dust and July heat and December mud and the quiet miracle of getting everyone home. But to him, that day, they were props in a play he was staging without a script. He lifted my uniform like it was a costume from a Halloween aisle, said, "Where'd you get this party store?" And he cracked the coin pouch. One jumped metal on metal, and the sound was small enough to miss. If you didn't love what it stood for, and big enough to bruise if you did, he nudged a coin with his boot like it was trash. And I said, "Sir, those are legitimate commendations." And he said, "Sure they are, sweetheart," which is a word that should come with a warning label in any professional setting. Behind him, 2 younger officers stared at the horizon like the sun had answers. I asked for a female officer if he intended to search my person. Because policy is policy, he said. I'll decide what policy requires, and right there, the story got simpler. Not because it was less complicated, but because once you hear someone tell you they are the policy, you can stop pretending you're engaged in a conversation. Cuffs clicked cool and impersonal, and I logged the things my brain logs when it needs to build a bridge through a storm badge. Numbers unit, numbers, locations, timestamps, quotes, the cadence of his breath, the way the neighbor's sprinkler hit the sidewalk, every third sweep, the jingle of keys at a belt, the detail that makes memory stick to truth, he told me. Make a call, 1, and I dialed. This is Sentinel 6, I said, detained by local law enforcement at Linden and Ash time, 1352. No probable cause, articulated search, initiated without consent. Uniform mishandled badge numbers as follows, and I read them out slow. And while I spoke, the younger officer across from me tilted his head like he was hearing a language he knew but hadn't expected in this room. Booking is fluorescent and cruel camera flash that turns honest faces guilty and guilty faces honest ink that finds the lines of your skin. You forgot we're there. The hum of a copier eating paper, the low echo of shoes on tile. They placed my coins in a tray and slid them across the counter as if they were loose screws, and in holding two, women looked up. One traced my rank in the air with a fingertip. A tiny nod, ma'am, she said under her breath like muscle memory that didn't ask permission. Out front, 3 black SUVs with government plates eased into the lot smooth as if the asphalt knew better than to resist, and a captain with silver at his temples walked into the lobby with a binder under one arm and a tone that said he'd be polite until the clock ran out. He asked for a supervisor by name and got Captain Teresa Klein, who has a voice that turns granite when the mayor is on line 2. They talked in the language of professionals who know the next 5 moves and already hate number 3. I didn't hear the words, but I felt the pressure change like weather in your knees. And before long, I was in a side office, cuffs off wrists marked dignity, mostly intact because stubbornness is a body armor you can wear under anything. Klein said, Colonel Ellis, there has been a misunderstanding, and I said there has been a series of choices. And that's the difference between a mistake and a pattern. That afternoon, I stood at a podium in dress blues, the fabric sitting just right because practice matters. Mic warm under my palm, and I told the room who I am and what I do. Without flair. My name is Colonel Maya Ellis. I oversee federal training and accountability funds for cross-agency public safety programs in this region. Our office administers around $42 million. This department receives roughly $2.6 million annually. And you could hear reporters lean forward like they were dogs catching a new scent. And I said yesterday was not a bad day. It was a failure. Chain policy. Ignored bias. Unchallenged power. Unmoored from responsibility. Everything I did was about keeping people alive, and everything he did was about making a story. I refused to fit, and I kept my voice even, because I've learned loud is cheap and steady is expensive. And to my left, the city manager stared at the floor like numbers were rearranging themselves under his shoes. To my right, our legal team slid packets with timestamps, body cam quotes, the exact phrase comply under protest highlighted because words build ladders in rooms where people love to watch you drown. Online, it took minutes for the clips to multiply. That little coin hop in the parking lot got looped and slowed and set to piano veterans groups posted statements that cut like a fresh razor. Civil rights attorneys called my tone surgical. Anonymous officers wrote to say thank you for not painting us all with the same brush. The DOJ Civil Rights Division opened a formal investigation. FBI forensics wheeled in carts to pull training records and grant compliance docs. And the air got cold in that station the moment someone asked for proof of who finished bias training and when. Turns out Doyle skipped more than he sat. Turns out some boxes got checked by people who didn't attend. Turns out you can hide habits for a while, but the tape always rolls, you feel me? That night, a union rep slid into a conference room with a tired look and an offer that sounded like every offer you get when someone wants you to trade a bruise for a Band-Aid, quiet settlement, a corrective plan, a public apology drafted by a consultant who knows how to center a mayor's re-election bid. And I said no, not like that. He asked, what do you want then? And I said structural change. You can measure monthly bias training with outside instructors, independent civilian oversight with subpoena power, automatic suspension of funding for civil rights violations, public dashboards, not PDFs, nobody reads, protect the good officers with good policy, and put the bad ones out the door before they get a family killed, he said. I was being political. I said I was being practical. Accountability protects everyone, citizens from harm and professionals from the stink of someone else's habits. And he blinked like the light changed, and he didn't know where the switch was anymore. The hearings landed 2 weeks later, a room that smells like old coffee and legal pads. Doyle in a suit that fit, like it borrowed his shoulders without asking his lawyer arguing. He did what he was taught, and let me tell you that defense is a boomerang. It travels out and comes back with an entire department attached training records, hit the screen, missed courses, signatures that looked like they were written by a left hand in the dark, complaints that got processed with the urgency of watering a cactus. The panel watched body cam footage of him calling my uniform a costume, and then listened to him complain about trial by media. And when he said she's playing the race card, the room didn't explode. It just exhaled because everyone heard the mask drop in real time, and he lost his badge that afternoon. Pension gone, certification revoked, criminal referrals lined up like planes waiting on tarmac. He didn't cry. He just looked like a man who discovered the door he used to leave his conscience outside had been bricked over while he was at lunch. People ask me if I felt triumphant, and truth is, triumph is too loud a word. What I felt was a circuit closing a system doing something like its job, and a catch of sadness because no one should be trained so poorly that they confuse a human being for a statistic and call it policing. But the reforms moved because pressure matched to a blueprint creates motion. The mayor called them the Ellis benchmarks on a podcast, and the name stuck. Completion rates climbed, complaints dipped use of force. Incidents hit automatic outside review. The city built a public map with stops by neighborhood race time outcome. And the thing about sunlight is it does more than disinfect it, changes behavior in ways shame never could. Months later, I parked at Linden and Ash and walked to the little pocket garden a civics class planted a neat square with a plaque that says Professional Service Honors, Constitutional Principles, Accountability, Protects Everyone, and I stood there with coffee and listened to a stop, done right, tone low reason, clear a warning for a busted light. Have a good night, sir. No siren, no theater, just work. And I am not naive. Bias is lint on a black sweater. It clings and shows in the worst light. The point isn't pretending you can vacuum the universe. The point is building processes that catch it before it cuts. I still get emails. A rookie who said the scenario training kept him from escalating. A stop he felt in his bones could go sideways. A mom who said her kid walks to the bus without a pit in his stomach. Now an officer who wrote that accountability made his job less lonely because he no longer has to carry a partner's bad habits. And, yeah, I still get messages with names they don't teach in Sunday school, folks trying to turn my discipline into arrogance, my patience into weakness. But bad faith gets winded when the numbers keep jogging by, you know what I mean. As for Doyle, the papers covered the convictions, federal first, then state. I saw one headline taped to a coffee shop wall near the courthouse, sun faded and torn, and I didn't linger. I'm not a recurring character in that chapter. People want to know if I still drive the car, and I do. I keep the seats clean and the paint beating. And when I see a patrol unit drift behind me, my chest tightens for a beat, then loosens, because fear doesn't get to keep the keys to my life. That's a rule I wrote for myself, and I'm sticking to it. Before I wrap this, let me say this plain. If you've ever been underestimated because of your zip code or your car or your skin, you are not crazy for feeling the weather change when the lights pop in your rear view. You are not weak for keeping your voice steady and your hands still. You are not alone. Document everything. Keep your cool. Use the systems when they exist. Make new ones when they don't. Strategy beats rage when the cameras are rolling, and if you're watching this in uniform and you wear that badge with pride, hear me. This isn't a finger in your face. It's a hand at your back, asking for policy that matches your oath. Strong rules make you safer too, because nothing is heavier than another person's misconduct on your conscience. Ridgeview Park looks the same as that Tuesday lawns, trimmed sprinklers misjudging the sidewalk by an inch, kids practicing wheelies. They'll regret in 20 years. What changed is quieter. It's a captain who doesn't have to defend the indefensible to keep her job. It's a dashboard where the public sees the same numbers the chief sees. It's a recruit class learning in month 1 that bias training isn't a box to check. It's 2 officers talking about a stop in terms of dignity, not dominance. It's a garden with a plaque and a story. Parents can tell their kids without skipping the hard parts. And because life loves symmetry, the twist in the middle of all this was simple. The guy who pulled me over for a car he thought I didn't deserve had no idea I helped decide whether his department kept the money it needed to train him. Right? Funny how the truth hides in plain sight until the right light hits it. Yeah, that happened. Here's where I leave you with the part that matters. What do you think? Where are you watching from? Have you seen a department get better or worse if you sat in that hearing room? Would you say Doyle was a product of a broken system or a man who kept choosing his worst self until the system finally told him no? Which reform where you live would change the most lives with the least drama? Drop your take, argue hard, but fair. And if this story jolted something in you, hit subscribe and share it. Next time I'm taking you inside a meeting where a simple spreadsheet exposed a network of training certifications that never happened, and what unfolded when we turned the lights on. Justice isn't loud. Most days, it's a checklist, a camera, a line on a log that refuses to be erased, and it's you and me deciding that right and wrong are not stories told after the fact, but choices made on Tuesdays, in neighborhoods where the grass still gets measured. Your voice matters, right here, right now.